Alright, so for this video, I want to talk about how the physical body is a prison. The prison planet starts with the physical body, right? What like the first thing that we all do whenever we enter into this realm of existence, whenever we enter into this plane of existence, is that we like babies cry. That's the first thing that everyone does whenever they arrive here. So that is something that is very interesting to see. Is that like the first thing that we all do is we scream in pain and agony and confusion whenever we arrive here, right? And one of the other aspects of like the body being a prison is the fact that we're basically like, especially human beings, we're basically useless or codependent for the first 8 to 10 years of our lifespan, right? But like one of the main things that I think makes the physical body a kind of prison is the fact that the body seems to be calibrated to feel pain more intensely than pleasure, right? And a good thought experiment for this is to basically to compare the most intense physical pain that you've ever experienced and the most intense physical pleasure that you've ever experienced, and to compare the two together. And if you compare the two, chances are that the most intense physical pain that you've experienced is likely like 10 times more intense than anything physically pleasurable that you've experienced. And so it does seem to be that the physical body seems to be calibrated to maximize how easy it is to feel physical pain, that it's easier to feel pain than it is to feel pleasure, which definitely contributes to misery, suffering, leash harvesting, the negative emotional energy that's generated from that. And in my personal experience, like the most physically painful thing that I've experienced in my life has been um, like whenever I had an asthma attack when I was a little kid, and I remember being hospitalized for 4 days straight, and I was literally like suffocating to death for 4 days straight, and I was awake the entire time also because I tried falling asleep because I was really fucking tired, but I literally couldn't fall asleep because of the fact that I was suffocating to death. I was literally suffocating to death for 4 days straight, and I was all like crying. I just wanted it to stop, and that I would say that that's the most intense physical pain that I've experienced. That was some like real Hellraiser shit that I went through, and there's no physical pleasure that I've experienced, at least so far, that's ever compared to that type of thing, right? So I think that that's the first sort of major thing about like the body being sort of a prison for the soul, is the fact that it does seem to be calibrated to maximize physical pain over physical pleasure, right? And the second thing that makes the body a prison is you have physical disabilities. Like if you're an able-bodied person, like the body is a prison. It's its own sort of prison, but especially for the physically disabled, if you're someone who has some genetic disorder, if you have cerebral palsy, if you're paraplegic, if you're paralyzed from the neck down, if you're someone who has if you get like bone cancer is something that is really horrifying, right? If you look at like the body's susceptibility to illness, right? Like there was this one girl that I met in college, like whenever I went to college for a semester, there was this one girl that I met who talked about how she lived her early years in and out of hospitals, because of the fact that she had a compromised immune system. I don't remember the exact details, but there was something about her immune system that made her susceptible to illness, and that she lived in and out of hospitals for most of her early years. And so it's the body is its own sort of prison, but especially if you're someone with physical disabilities and also like mental disabilities as well. If you look at someone like people with Down syndrome, or people with genetic disabilities that give them just like a lower capacity to think or to be aware, like that is definitely something that is terrifying. Is like you're an infinite spark of consciousness, and then you get put into a body of that is basically like a potato. Essentially, if you look at like the computing power of a potato, you're basically crammed into there. And so it is very like a very horrifying and sort of almost like a humiliating thing for like you're like an infinite spark of consciousness, you're like a divine spark, and you get shoved into a body that's like a literal prison, where it's like you're like, if you have like cerebral palsy or something like that, you're literally stuck inside of a body that is like useless, that you can't move anywhere without the assistance of someone else. You can't take a shit without being assisted by someone else. You have to like be fed by someone else. It is like a very like a humiliating thing for like consciousness to have to go through that experience. So it does seem to be like a humiliation ritual for the people who are physically disabled or mentally disabled. It's almost like a humiliation of consciousness, especially for those people, not just for the people who are able-bodied, and like it's easier for the body to feel pain. But especially for the people who are susceptible to illness, who have genetic disabilities, physical disabilities, where the body is even more of a prison for those people than the able-bodied individuals, right? And you look at the body's susceptibility to injury. Like, here's the thing: like, physical pain wouldn't be as much of a problem if you could actually heal, if you could like grow back your limbs like a salamander. Like, if you get into like a live leak accident, like a Chinese steel mill accident where like a piece of machinery falls into your arm and your arm is cut off or something, it wouldn't be as much of a problem if like that limb is going to grow back in 2 weeks, right? But that's not the case with the body, where it's like if you get any major injury, it's like it's wraps for you. Like, if you get paralyzed from the waist down, it's fucking wraps for you. Like, there's no significant healing from serious injuries. Like, the body does heal from minor injuries, of course, but when it comes to like serious injuries, there's a lot of people that don't come back from that type of stuff, right? Where it's like if you get hit by a drunk driver and you get paralyzed from the neck down, or if you get into like a horse accident, like Christopher Reeve, like where he gets like paralyzed from the neck down, he has to wheel himself around in the wheelchair. Like there's really no coming back from that type of stuff. And so it does seem to be like the body is sort of like maximized for physical pain and like experiencing injury without any like rectification or like repair for it. So it does seem to be like there's like an imbalance in terms of like how the body is sort of designed to experience pain and to experience injury without any rectification, without anything to balance it out, right? And another thing about like the physical body is like even if you're an able-bodied person, right, you're still bound by the laws of physics. You're still bound by like the physical form that you're born with is something that you're bound with. Like, and this is something that I've always found to be very attractive in fiction, is like this idea of like changing into different animals, right? Like being able to shapeshift into different animals was something that I've always felt like that was an interesting thing to do, or being like fucking Jake the dog in Adventure Time, Adventure Time or something. Just being able to change your physical form at will is definitely something that I think is very liberating. But we're stuck in this one singular form where it doesn't seem like we have the ability to really change our form in any way that's significantly deviant from what we're born with, genetically, right? And I definitely think that if you look at like the whole like choose your character thing, like before you're born, right? Like there's certain attributes that you're born with that you can't realistically change throughout your life. So if you like the race that you're born as, the gender that you're born as, the height that you have, your looks and your attractiveness on your face, or like how chopped you are, like whether or not you're chopped, can definitely determine how hellish your experience in this reality is. And it's also something that is like the thing about like race that's very interesting is like the fact that I do think that what race you're born as can definitely determine like how hellish your experience is, like, or it can tailor the experience of this realm to you specifically. If you're someone who's like, if your soul is very if you're someone who's like very free spirited and you don't like being told what to do, you might get born as like an Asian person with strict Asian parents, because that's like a part of like that's a part of the some parts of Asian culture is like you have like strict parents that like tell you what to do. You get pressured to become a doctor. You get pressured to get good grades. You get like forced to play the violin. I know that that's like a stereotype, but that's something that is like based on reality. Is like this whole like living vicariously through your children, trying to force your children to be a certain thing, right? So if that is something that is disgusting or repulsive to your soul, you might get born in as a certain race, right? If you're someone who, and it makes me think of like this one video that I saw from this guy. I think his YouTube channel is called Sloth, and he talks about how like he's a black dude and he's sort of ostracized by other black people for not being, stereotypically ghetto, right? So if you're someone who like, if your soul doesn't like aspects of like black ghetto culture, you might be like, all right, you're gonna be born as a black person, and then you get ostracized. You get called like an Oreo or an Uncle T, or whatever the fuck, right? Or if you're someone who you might get born as a white person, and then in a majority black neighborhood, you might get born as a black person in a majority white neighborhood. I don't. It's stuff like that where I think that it's very easy to like the fact that race is such a touchy subject, right? The fact that it's very easy to start conflict. It's very easy to start like the social isolation, the social shaming, on the basis of race. It's very easy to start to like generate loosh on the basis of race, depending on like what culture your like the race that you're born as is associated with. So that definitely can affect the kind of loosh, like the flavor of loosh that you generate on this planet, right? And I definitely think that also whether or not you're born as a man or a woman, depending on your geographical location as well. Right, it's almost like I sentence you to be born as a woman in the Middle East, right? Like, can you imagine? That definitely is like a hellish experience if you're born as like a woman inside of a country with like Sharia law that allows like child marriage to like a 6-year-olds or something, right? That whole thing could definitely add to the hellishness of your experience. Like, not only like the race you're born as, not only like whether or not you're a man or a woman, but also like like your spawn point, right? So you can essentially be like fucking spawn camped by the demiurge, essentially, depending on where you're born, right? It's where it's like, and imagine if it was like time travel rules too. It's like I sentence you to be a black person during Jim Crow. I sentence you to be, like a white guy in the UK, like right now. Like right now, like the way that the UK is with like mass immigration, and like the way that the media sort of demonizes white people. That is another thing too, where it's like, or if you're born as like a white person in a country that sort of demonizes you for being white, or if you're born into a southern town or whatever that demonizes you for being black. If you're like, it goes both ways. It's not like, oh, like this race or that, like your racial circumstances could definitely and your spawn point, your geographical location can definitely determine the type of loosh that you generate, the type of experiences, and how ostracized you are by society, depending on where you're born at, right? But also, like, if you want to talk about like men versus women, right? Like the menstrual cycles and periods are definitely that's definitely something that is extremely horrifying to me. Like this idea of like you get stomach cramps and you bleed out of your private parts every month, and the interesting thing about this, and this is a very sort of schizo take that I have, is that like you look at like how periods are correlated with the lunar cycles. You look at how like periods and menstrual cycles are correlated with the lunar cycles, and you look at like the Saturn Moon matrix. You look at how like the moon fucks with the energy bodies of people. You look at how like the emergency room encounters more activity during a full moon. You look at how like police officers will tell you that there's more crime during a full moon. So it definitely makes me think like I don't think that menstrual cycles are normal. I don't think that that's natural. I definitely think that there's something that has been fucked with in terms of like the energy body of women specifically. Right. So like yet again, like whether or not you're born as a woman can determine like the physical suffering that you experience as well. Right. But if you want to talk about like geographical location, if you want to sort of extrapolate on that, I definitely think that demonic entities and like the archons, they definitely sort of cluster around certain locations. Like the more miserable, like the more third world misery there is, it does seem to be that there's more demons there to sort of harvest the energy. Or like it makes me even think just locations like schools, hospitals, funeral homes, cemeteries, like offices where there's like a lot of like toxic coworkers that gossip about you, like narcissistic like HR people, right? There's stuff like that. I definitely think that demons will cluster around major cities in order to harvest loot, in order to harvest energy. So whenever it comes to location, like whether or not you're born into a major city where there's like more people, it's more of a rat cage, it's more susceptible to generating loot, there's more susceptibility to conflict or whatever. Like that is definitely something that affects your experiences, like whether or not you're in a place that it encounters a higher concentration of demons, right? Because I definitely think that it's almost like that anime Jujutsu Kaisen, where it's like the cursed spirits will sort of form around places like schools or sort of office buildings where there's like a lot of negative energy. I definitely think that like stuff like hospitals as well, where like there's more death, there's more physical suffering, there's more grieving that happens in these locations. So I definitely think that location is something that is a very interesting topic of discussion, right? And like another thing that's interesting about, if you want to talk about like third world countries, like how third world a country is, it does seem to be that and I noticed this especially with like South Asian countries and like a lot of Latin American countries, is like the more third world the conditions are, the more normalized witchcraft and like entity worship is. If you look at like for example, like my dad was like a missionary and he went to Mexico on one of his mission trips, and he talked about how they practice Santeria, like that's the Mexican witchcraft that they practice in Mexico, where they cut off chicken heads and they make offerings to the patron saints. That's something that the cartels in Mexico practice. Is they practice this Santeria, they practice the Mexican witchcraft where they make offerings to these patron saints and whatever. And so if you grow up in a society where it's more normalized to worship demons. It's more normalized to cast hexes onto people and to sacrifice animals and stuff like that, then obviously your state of consciousness is going to be more susceptible, and your culture and your society as a whole is going to be more open to demonic invasion, right? And this is what we're experiencing on the planet, right? Is that we're experiencing an interdimensional invasion through people, right? Through demonic possession, right? We're experiencing an invasion of this space, of this realm, through the astral plane, from these demonic entities. And so that does seem to be a thing that is correlated with like how clustered demons are, and especially if you look at like South Asian countries. If you look at countries like India, where there's garbage everywhere, there's people shitting in the streets and all this other stuff. If you look at like the culture there, like they worship like these multi-armed, Nephilim entities, right? Like the bulging eyes, like the multiple arms, like they're like giant entities, with like the the teeth sticking out, and a lot of the statues in like Hinduism are very creepy to me, right? So I think that yet again, if you grow up in a culture where that's normalized, then it definitely makes your consciousness more susceptible to possession, because you get exposed to that imagery earlier on. You get exposed to the rituals, you get exposed to like the dark magic and the witchcraft earlier on, and so it's more normalized for you to have that enter into your consciousness, right? But going back to like the physical body as a prison, right? Like the body at the end of the day, like the body is a container for the soul. It reminds me of sort of like Bob Lazar, like whenever he talks about how like the alien, the sort of gray entities, the gray aliens, they talk about us. They talk about human beings as containers for the soul. They call us containers. That this idea that like we're not our physical body. We are not of this world. We're not the bodies that we inhabit, right? So I think that obsessing over political, national, racial identities, that's definitely like it's a divide and conquer tactic. First of all, to wrap your whole identity around being a black person, wrap your whole identity around being a white person, wrap your whole identity around being a Latino person, being an Asian person, right? Like if you wrap your whole identity around like the attributes of your physical body, that's definitely something that it attaches you to this realm, but it also feeds into the whole divide and conquer, where humanity is too busy fighting amongst themselves in order to see that there's non-human interdimensional invading entities, that there's fucking lizard people, there's fucking gray aliens that are running the whole show. And so it's almost like it's almost kind of interesting how it's like we should replace human racism with like alien racism. We need to come up with fucking slurs we need to come up with slurs for the reptilians. We need to come up with slurs for the lizard people, man. uh, it's and here's the thing: if there's one thing that humanity is good at, it's we're very good at being racist. Okay, so if we can just direct that energy towards a more positive sort of to a more fucking positive outcome, I definitely think that is an interesting thing. But yet again, that whole divide and conquer tactic, that is something that you notice with like the algorithm. That the algorithm, it definitely, especially nowadays, like it definitely pushes more for racial division, men versus women, the political divide, the political puppet show of like right wing versus left wing, like what nationality you are. Like these are all things that and here's the thing: like I'm not one of those blue pill people who doesn't acknowledge that there's certain realities. Like you can show like the whole global IQ map and stuff like that. Like I understand, right? Like I'm not going to be someone who is going to shy away from that just because of whatever, just because it's not politically correct. But at the same time, I do think that we are divine sparks inside of physical bodies, and so I think that identifying with these physical forms is definitely a trap. It's definitely something that it ties us into this realm, it attaches us to this realm, and it definitely prevents us from detaching and escaping from this reality if our entire identity is tied up in like the video game avatar that we are inside of the body. Yet again, the body is a container. We are containers for something else, that like whenever we die, all that gets left behind anyway. And so I think that is more of like my perspective whenever it comes to this stuff. And it is kind of interesting because I think that my concern is more of like are you an NPC? Are you an energy, like an energy vampire? Are you a narcissist? Are you a player character? Right? And that's more of my concern nowadays. Like I'm not necessarily concerned about socio-political racial, religious, nationality type of stuff. There was a time in my life where I used to be obsessed over that. I used to be obsessed over race. I used to be obsessed over, like what race I am, what races I like, what races I dislike, what yada yada yada. Like I used to be obsessed over that, but now I think that it's more of like like yet again, the body is a container for the soul. And now like my perspective is like I'm more concerned with like schizos versus psychos versus the normies. Like that's the caste system that I'm sort of approaching this with, nowadays. But and it is another thing too, which is that I think if you could see people's souls outwardly displayed as their bodies, I think we'd all be different types of fantasy creatures. I don't think that we're all one humanity. I think that this idea that we're all one humanity is fucking bullshit. I think that there's wolves, there's cats, there's dogs, there's snakes, there's mice, there's rats, right? Like, and it makes me think of like the whole like the new age sort of star seed stuff. Like I'm very against new agey stuff, but it does sort of start to make sense if you look at like the whole star seed stuff. That like, oh, okay, like if you feel like you're an alien inside of a human body, you might literally be an alien inside of a human body, or something like that. Like I definitely think that we're not all the same humanity. I definitely think that if you could see people's souls, if you could put on like those sort of sunglasses from They Live, I definitely think that you could definitely see people, as different fantasy creatures. There'd be like goblins, there'd be zombies, there'd be dwarves, there'd be, dragons, there'd be like all these different types of stuff. And I definitely think that that's more of what my concern is nowadays. But, going back to the original subject of the video, I definitely think that, height and looks is something that people talk about as, something that determines how well you're treated and how poorly you're treated. And it makes me think of like like what if there's like a higher concentration of player characters that are chopped? Like what if all the chopped people are the real people, and what if like all the conventionally attractive people are more likely to be fake, right? And I don't know, it is kind of interesting because I have experienced this thing before where it's like I'll look at someone who's conventionally attractive, and there's something about them that's off to me. Like they'll look conventionally attractive on the outside, but there's something about their grimace, like whenever they do like that fake smile or whatever, that just it's sort of off to me. Like they have that sort of the sort of Phoenician mask sort of grimace that they do that's sort of off to me. And then I'll talk to someone who's chopped or whatever, and like there's more of like a real energy to the person who's like they're not conventionally attractive, they're not conventionally good looking necessarily, but there's more of like a real energy to the chuds. You know what I mean? So I definitely think that the body, that if we want to talk about the body as a prison, like the body as like a way of like like the body that you're born in being you sort of determinate of like what of like how much misery you go through. I definitely think that like the more chopped you are, like if you're like a 5'3", if you're a 5'3", guy who's like chopped and you don't look at, you get treated like the scum of the earth by society. It really is a thing that really does happen. It really is like a thing where people say looks don't matter, it's about personality, but society does treat you differently depending on how you look, and that's something that is an aspect of the body, like the genetics that you're born with too. So that also definitely contributes to the negative energy, the loose harvesting that you might experience in this realm, right? But yeah, I definitely think that attaching yourself to the aspects of the physical body, trying to identify yourself with like the body that you're born in, that's definitely that definitely is a trap. And I definitely think that the body does play a huge role in sort of the confinement of the soul, and how people sort of experience this realm. I definitely think that the prison planet starts with the body. Yet again, the container the body is a container for the soul, that it's something that binds and imprisons the soul in something that is limited, that's bound by the laws of physics, that feels pain more than pleasure, right? So I definitely think that is something to sort of think about whenever you look at the aspects of this realm, right? But yeah, that's the video.